Beatrice Monroe stood at the rickety porch of her small home, the sharp morning air biting at her skin. The Wyoming wind howled softly through the cracks in the wooden structure, sounding almost like whispers of lost dreams. Just a few months ago, this home was filled with laughter and warmth. Now, it felt cold and hollow without her husband, William. His sudden death had left a void in her heart and a mountain of debt on her shoulders. The reality of her situation pressed upon her like a heavy weight as she glanced down the dirt road leading into town. News spread quickly in a tight-knit community like hers. It wasn't long before the saloon owner, a burly man named Gus, had stepped right into her life with an offer that felt more like a threat. "You marry me, Beatrice," he had said in his gruff voice, "and I'll take care of those debts. A woman alone is a burden. But with a husband?" He chuckled, his eyes glinting with greed. "You be set." Beatrice shivered at the thought. She didn't want to become another item on a man's ledger or an asset to be traded. Her heart raced as she remembered how loving William had been. They had shared dreams of adventure, traveling to places far beyond the dusty plains of Wyoming. Now, those dreams seemed so distant, swept away with the wind. Sighing, she turned back to the inside of her home. The sunlight broke through the clouds, casting gentle rays across the modest furniture and faded photographs. Each piece reminded her of William, his laughter still echoing in her thoughts, his smile forever etched in her memory. She desperately missed him, but more than that, she missed the sense of security that came with having someone beside her. Yet, even in grief, Beatrice was determined not to let fear dictate her choices. The townsfolk whispered about her plight as if she were some tragic tale out of a storybook. "Poor Beatrice," they would say, shaking their heads. "She needs to remarry. It's the only way." Their pity felt suffocating. For them, a woman alone was simply inconceivable. As she glanced out the window once more, something unusual caught her eye. A figure appeared on horseback, silhouetted against the rising sun. The cold dawn light sparkled off the rider's red sash, a symbol of mourning. Beatrice squinted to see better. It was a warrior from the Cheyenne tribe, someone she'd never met but had heard whispers about in town. Tokala rode into the settlement with purpose and strength. His presence commanded attention, and soon enough, townsfolk began to gather around him, curiosity mingling with apprehension. Why was he here? What did he want? The moment he dismounted, his expression grew serious as he approached the gathering crowd. Murmurs erupted among the townsfolk, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected visitor. Tokala raised his hand for silence, waiting for calm to settle over the assembly. "Good people of this town," he spoke, his voice deep and measured, drawing everyone's attention to him. "I have come seeking Beatrice Monroe." The crowd shifted uneasily as whispers spread like wildfire. Her heart raced again. Why would he be looking for her? "I carry a message from my sister," he continued. "Long ago, Beatrice saved her life during troubled times. I owe her my gratitude and wish to honor that debt." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat as memories flickered through her mind. Days spent nursing a sick child in their village when she had ventured into Cheyenne territory to seek help for her own family. She had never expected someone would remember such an act. The saloon owner's smirk faded as Tokala's presence commanded respect among the townspeople. Suddenly, the weight of Beatrice's choice felt heavier than ever. Here was a man who not only recognized her worth but one who dared to defend it against oppressive traditions. As the council meeting was called, Beatrice realized this moment could change everything for her. A chance to reclaim her autonomy and refuse being defined by others' expectations. The path before her was unclear, but for the first time since William's passing, hope flickered within her heart like the first light of dawn breaking through a dark night. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Beatrice sat in her modest kitchen, the scent of stale bread mixing with the cold morning air that seeped through the cracked windows. Her heart was heavy, and her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The proposal from Gus, the saloon owner, echoed like a menacing drumbeat in her head. "A woman alone is a burden," he had said, his voice dripping with an unsettling mix of charm and threat. The townsfolk never hesitated to voice their opinions, often discussing her fate as if it were a matter of public interest rather than her personal life. "It's for her own good," they would say in hushed tones, convinced that marrying Gus was the only way to save Beatrice from poverty and shame. But what good was a life shackled to a man driven by greed? She had watched as others in town were treated as possessions, their voices silenced behind closed doors. Beatrice refused to be another pawn in someone else's game. She recalled the moments spent with William, where love had flourished freely and laughter filled their home. Those memories now felt like distant dreams, overshadowed by the grim reality of her present. Beatrice couldn't help but feel the weight of judgment from her neighbors. Their eyes followed her with pity and disdain, whispering about how she had to remarry to restore her place in society. Each glance felt like a reminder that without a husband, she would forever be seen as an outcast. The sound of heavy footsteps approached, breaking her reverie. It was Gus, his broad frame filling her doorway as he leaned against the frame with a smug expression that made her skin crawl. "Morning, Beatrice," he drawled lazily, his eyes glinting with expectation. "Have you thought more about my offer?" Beatrice took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she could muster. "I don't think it's right for me to marry just to escape debts," she replied firmly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Right or wrong doesn't matter much out here," he retorted, waving a dismissive hand. "You're not just a widow, you're a burden on this town. People like me help folks like you." He stepped closer, invading her space as his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "You marry me, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll have a roof over your head and food on your plate." The idea churned in her stomach like spoiled milk. "And at what cost?" she shot back defiantly. "I refuse to be bought and sold like some piece of property." Gus chuckled darkly. "You think you have options? The council won't let you stay here alone. You'll be forced out. Better to have someone like me on your side than face the cold world outside." Beatrice's heart raced as she fought against tears of frustration and anger. The reality he painted felt suffocating, a life of dependence on a man who saw her as little more than an obligation rather than a partner. As she pushed past him toward the door, ready to seek solace outside, she caught sight of the townsfolk gathering at the end of the street. They were curious about Tokala's arrival and his intentions toward Beatrice, but she knew they were also waiting for Gus's response to his unexpected challenge. "Remember," Gus called after her, his tone suddenly serious but still laced with arrogance, "you can't escape what you are. A woman alone is no neighbor to anyone." As Beatrice stepped into the sunlight, she felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair that surrounded her. The townspeople might believe a single woman was a burden, but Tokala's presence hinted at something different, a chance to redefine what it meant to stand strong and independent. She joined the gathering crowd just as Tokala began speaking again. His voice rang out clear and confident against the murmurs of the crowd. For the first time in weeks, Beatrice felt the stirrings of courage rise within her. Maybe this warrior would help her reclaim not just her home but also her dignity. As she stood there listening, Beatrice realized that perhaps it was time for her story to change, to challenge old traditions and carve out a new path where she would no longer be defined by others' expectations or fears. The warmth of determination began to fill her heart once more. She would not let anyone dictate who she was or what she could become. As Beatrice stood among the gathered townsfolk, her heart raced with uncertainty. The air buzzed with whispers, each person weighing in on her fate as though she were a character in a play rather than a woman facing an agonizing decision. Their chatter filled the space around her, punctuated by nods of agreement and murmurs of discontent, revealing the delicate web of relationships that defined their small community. "Well, I'd say it's about time Beatrice settled down," said Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly woman with wisps of gray hair escaping from beneath her bonnet. "A widow shouldn't be alone. It's just not proper." "Exactly," chimed in Mr. Thompson, leaning against a fence post with arms crossed over his chest. "What's she going to do? Struggle along without a man? That's no way for a lady to live." His tone was dismissive, reinforcing the old belief that women needed men for validation and survival. Their words hung heavy in the air, and Beatrice felt the weight of their opinions pressing down on her like a stone. It was as if they had formed a council of judges around her, deciding her worth based on outdated ideals rather than her character or strength. She wanted to shout that she was more than just a widow needing rescue. She was a person with dreams and desires. As the group continued to discuss Gus's offer, some voiced their support for him, echoing his claims about her being a burden. "He's a good man," Mrs. Hargrove asserted. "He can provide for her. Better to be married than to live alone in fear." We all know what happens to women who have no one to protect them. Beatrice clenched her fist at the thought. Protect them? Was marriage really protection, or merely another form of captivity? The image of herself tied down by obligations and expectations made her shiver. She saw glimpses of other women who had entered marriages filled with compromises instead of love, trapped within walls built by society's narrow definitions. Tokala's arrival had shaken things up in ways she hadn't anticipated. His presence challenged everything they believed about marriage and partnership. He represented something different, courage that didn't stem from ownership, but from respect and honor. "Now hold on just a minute," protested Samuel Jenkins, a farmer well-liked among his peers who often spoke out against traditional norms. "Isn't it true that Beatrice is capable of taking care of herself? We can't ignore how hard she worked alongside William on their farm." His defense drew murmurs of surprise. It was rare for someone to speak against the prevailing sentiment in such tight-knit circles where conformity ruled thoughts and actions. "She deserves more than just marrying to fill an empty space," he continued passionately. "What about respecting her choice? A woman alone can still contribute to this community in valuable ways." Silence fell briefly over the gathering as people processed Samuel's words. They were not used to questioning established norms, especially when those norms seemed so deeply ingrained into their everyday lives. Beatrice felt hope bloom within her chest at Samuel's support, but also anxiety at the repercussions it could bring him. Would they view him as defying tradition? Would he face backlash simply for standing up for what he believed? However, despite the mixed reactions around her, Beatrice recognized that perhaps change was possible, that perhaps there were others who shared her desire for independence beyond the confines of marriage. As groups began to form around different opinions, those rallying behind Gus's claim versus those supporting Beatrice's autonomy, the town became embroiled in intense discussions over what was right or wrong. The dynamics were shifting before Beatrice's eyes. Voices grew louder and bolder as people expressed their thoughts openly instead of hiding behind veiled whispers. For once, they were forced to confront their beliefs about women's roles and what it truly meant to support one another within their community. Amidst this turmoil, Beatrice felt emboldened by Tokala's presence. It was clear he embodied something profoundly different from Gus's offer, an understanding that honor could exist outside societal expectations. As thoughts swirled around her like leaves caught in a fresh breeze, Beatrice understood that she was not alone after all. She had allies willing to stand with her against traditional pressures pushing toward conformity. The thought ignited a flame within her. She would take control of her own story and seek out what true partnership meant, one rooted in equality and respect rather than obligation or fear. With newfound determination coursing through her veins, Beatrice prepared herself for whatever lay ahead, a council meeting where choices would be made, but now she knew she wouldn't face it alone, together with those who believed in change. They might reshape not only their destinies but also their community itself. The chill of dawn wrapped itself around the town as Tokala rode in, silhouetted against the pale morning sky. His horse moved confidently along the dirt path, each hoofball echoing softly in the stillness of the early hour. The sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, casting a golden glow that illuminated his powerful figure and the striking red sash he wore, a symbol of mourning that swayed gently as he rode. The townsfolk stirred from their mundane routines, their curiosity piqued by this unexpected visitor. Tokala was a figure both regal and intimidating. His long hair flowed like shadows behind him, and his piercing gaze seemed to see through the layers of their judgments and fears. As he dismounted with practiced grace, whispers spread like wildfire, rippling through the gathering crowd. "Who is he?" someone murmured, eyes wide as they pointed toward him. "I've heard stories about Cheyenne warriors," another voice chimed in, filled with equal parts fear and fascination. "They're strong and fierce." Yet it was not just tales of strength that drew them together, but a sense of urgency, a feeling that something significant was about to unfold. Tokala stood tall, surveying the assembled townspeople with calm authority before raising his hand for silence. His deep voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. "People of this town," he began, each word measured and deliberate, "I have come to seek Beatrice Monroe." A hush fell over the crowd as they exchanged glances, confusion mingling with anticipation. Beatrice, still grappling with her own tumultuous feelings, was near the front, heart racing as she stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention despite her doubts. She felt both exposed and empowered under his gaze. "I carry a message from my sister," Tokala continued, glancing at Beatrice with respect etched across his features. "Long ago, she was saved by this woman during difficult times. I owe her my gratitude and wish to honor that debt." His words hung in the air as realization washed over Beatrice. Memories flooded back of a time when she had ventured into Cheyenne territory seeking help for a sick child, a small act but one that had made a profound difference in someone's life. Until now, she hadn't realized how far-reaching that impact had been. As murmurs spread through the crowd again, this time mixed with concern and intrigue, Beatrice felt an unexpected sense of solidarity build within her chest. Here was someone rising against traditional expectations. Tokala's presence challenged not only her own situation but also illuminated the broader implications for women in their community. Gus stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed defensively as he watched Tokala's every move. The saloon owner was not accustomed to being overshadowed, especially not by a warrior from an opposing tribe who claimed ties to a woman he aimed to control. Jealousy flickered in Gus's eyes as he sensed his hold on Beatrice slipping amidst such an unexpected turn of events. "Why should we listen to this man?" Gus interjected loudly, trying to regain control over the gathering dynamics. "What does he know about our lives here? We have our own way of doing things." But Tokala remained unfazed by Gus's outburst. Instead, he turned directly toward him with calm authority in his stance. "This is not merely about our ways but about honor," he replied resolutely. "Beatrice saved my sister when no one else would help her. It is time for honor to be recognized where it is due." The townsfolk shifted uneasily at this confrontation between two men representing vastly different values, a testament to how deeply ingrained beliefs about marriage and dependency tangled within their society's fabric. In that moment, a spark ignited among those listening intently, including Beatrice herself, as they began weighing their own preconceived notions against what Tokala represented, dignity founded on respect rather than obligation. With every second that passed under morning light, hope crept into her heart again. An opportunity for change seemed there for the taking. As discussions ignited amidst varying opinions swirling around her like leaves caught in an autumn breeze, Beatrice realized she could be part of something bigger than herself. She could stand alongside allies who believed in equality and autonomy as much as she did. With determination rekindling inside her spirit, fueled further by Tokala's compelling presence, Beatrice felt ready for whatever lay ahead during this decisive council meeting where choices would shape lives forevermore. In each heartbeat resounding against her chest echoed a promise. She would no longer allow herself or others to be defined solely by tradition or fear, and together with those willing to champion change, they might carve out new paths toward freedom within this close-knit community still bound by its past yet eager to redefine its future. As the early morning sun began to rise, casting a warm hue over the town, Tokala stood before the assembled crowd with a calm yet commanding presence. His request for a council had set the townsfolk buzzing with anticipation and confusion. Beatrice felt her heart thump in her chest. This was no ordinary visitor. This was someone who had come to challenge the very fabric of her current reality, and she knew that his intentions were rooted in something deeper than mere gratitude. With the crowd still murmuring around them, Tokala raised his voice once more, ensuring every ear tuned into his words. "I ask for your attention," he said firmly, his deep voice cutting through the whispers like a sharp blade. "What I seek is not only to honor my sister, but also to protect Beatrice Monroe from the burdens that have been unfairly placed upon her." The townspeople exchanged glances filled with intrigue and skepticism. They were accustomed to discussing matters of marriage and obligation as if they were merely transactions, but Tokala's tone hinted at something much more profound, an acknowledgement of Beatrice's worth beyond societal expectations. Beatrice felt a surge of emotions at his words. Protecting her? That notion felt foreign yet comforting at the same time. She had fought so hard to survive since losing William, but now here was this warrior standing up for her, evoking memories of their past connection, a bond forged when she had ventured into Cheyenne territory seeking help for his sick sister. Years ago, it had been a desperate act fueled by empathy that led her into unknown lands. At that time, she hadn't thought twice about crossing boundaries to offer assistance. It was simply what one did for others in need. But now, as she looked into Tokala's eyes, she recognized that act of kindness had not gone unnoticed. It had carved a path between their lives that transcended cultural divides. "Beatrice saved my sister's life when few would have dared to help," Tokala continued passionately, drawing everyone's focus back to him. "She showed bravery and compassion during our darkest hour." His words reverberated through Beatrice's heart as she recalled how her own struggles paled compared to those faced by Tokala's people during difficult times. In that moment of vulnerability, she understood how deeply interconnected their stories were, their lives woven together by shared experiences of loss and struggle. From the back of the crowd, Gus scoffed loudly, attempting to undermine Tokala's revelation and regain control over the narrative. "And what does this warrior know about our lives?" he sneered dismissively. This is just another ploy to disrupt our way of living. But rather than deterring Tokala, Gus's outburst only strengthened his resolve. With unyielding determination etched across his face, he addressed Gus directly. This is about more than tradition or convenience. It is about honor. Honor has been forgotten in your rush to bind Beatrice with chains fashioned from debts and expectations. The tension between them became palpable as the townsfolk watched intently, their loyalties torn between familiar customs and an emerging sense of justice championed by this outsider. It stirred something within them, a recognition that perhaps there was another way forward. Beatrice felt empowered by Tokala's defense not only for herself, but also on behalf of all women who yearned for autonomy beyond societal confines, a chance to reclaim their identities amid persistent pressures. Within her grew a new sense of purpose, surrounded by allies willing to stand against oppressive norms and support true partnership based on mutual respect rather than obligation alone. Let us hold this council, Tokala proposed again with intention. Let us discuss how we might uplift one another instead of binding ourselves further into chains. His call echoed through the gathering like a clarion bell. It transformed from mere words into an invitation for change, a chance for each person present to examine their beliefs about honor and community. As conversation sparked among groups huddled together, some rallying behind Tokala while others remained loyal to established norms, Beatrice took solace in knowing that perhaps this confrontation could bring forth new possibilities. With each passing moment beneath the dawn sky brightening above them, hope blossomed within Beatrice's heart anew, the realization that together they might shape a brighter future where individuals were valued beyond conventional measures. No longer would she be defined solely by loss or fear, with Tokala standing beside her as both protector and ally in this fight against pervasive traditions. They could forge ahead toward an unknown horizon filled with promise and respect. One built not on obligations or burdens but on shared courage and acceptance. In that dawning light illuminated by burgeoning possibilities, Beatrice readied herself for whatever decisions lay ahead at this pivotal council meeting, not just for herself, but for all those who sought liberation from outdated chains binding them down. The atmosphere in the town thickened with anticipation as Tokala's words lingered in the air among the gathered crowd. It was almost palpable, the crackling tension between the deep-rooted traditions that dictated women must marry to secure their futures, and the stirring notion of honor and protection that Tokala represented. Beatrice stood at the center of this unfolding drama, acutely aware of the stark contrast between her isolated plight and the collective norms pressed upon her. In the eyes of many townsfolk, a single woman embodied helplessness, a responsibility to be fixed by marriage rather than embraced for her strength and character. The whispers surrounding Beatrice now veered from pity to skepticism as they processed Tokala's challenge to their expectations. "He's just a man from another tribe," one older woman muttered. "What does he know about our ways?" This sentiment echoed among pockets of the crowd, reaffirming a stubborn allegiance to their established customs. Yet, within that very skepticism lay room for reconsideration. A glimmer of doubt began to creep into their certainty. As Tokala spoke boldly about honor and respect, some listened closely, intrigued by his assertion that protection need not come through obligation, but rather through mutual respect and acknowledgement of true worth. For many of the women standing among them, his words ignited something dormant, a yearning for recognition beyond the constraints placed upon them by men like Gus. The saloon owner watched the growing support for Tokala with visible frustration. His usual bravado had started to wane, replaced by a simmering anger. "This is nonsense," he shouted over the stirring crowd, trying to reassert control. "A woman needs protection. Beatrice can't survive without a man." But instead of rallying the townsfolk behind him, Gus found himself increasingly isolated as murmurs of dissent wafted through the gathering. Certain men in the crowd began to shift, recalling instances where they had seen women thrive not through marriage, but through their own perseverance and hard work. "My sister ran her own farm while raising 3 children after her husband passed." One man finally spoke up, his voice steady. "She managed just fine without a husband." With each passing moment, Tokala's presence seemed to draw people closer to a new understanding of what honor truly meant. No longer was it merely about providing for someone or restricting them with chains fashioned from societal obligations. Rather, it became an exhortation for individuals to uphold integrity and respect one another, regardless of gender. Beatrice felt emboldened by these shifts as she listened to the townsfolk reconsider not just her plight but their collective beliefs about women's roles. Could they truly start to understand that women also deserved agency, autonomy, and esteem? The hope stirred within her heart like wildfire, each whisper engulfing old fears and flames of possibility. Let us not forget, Tokala interjected again, addressing anyone who would listen. Honor is about recognizing sacrifices made for others. I am here to remind you all that Beatrice's bravery saved my sister. It is time we acknowledge her worth alongside our cultural pillars. His words struck chords among various members of the community. Both men and women began reflecting on their expectations of women, those tied merely to household duties and marital roles versus those rooted in respect for their tremendous capabilities. Beatrice observed nodding heads across the sea of faces before her. It became clear that she was not alone in her desire for change. Duking it out with entrenched norms wasn't solely her burden. There was an emerging support network rallying around her, a coalition willing to fight against traditional values. As conversations intensified amongst those listening, leans forward cloaked in hope and uncertainty. Beatrice understood this pivotal moment could redefine both her future and that of countless other women who felt tethered to expectations they never asked for. The sun broke higher in the sky, flooding the town with warmth. So metaphorically, too, did courage seep into the hearts of those gathering around Tokala and Beatrice. This was more than just a council meeting. It was a reckoning forced upon them by evolving ideals regarding fate and choice. Gus attempted one final retort, but it fell onto deaf ears as people increasingly turned back toward Tokala's sincerity and belief in partnership over possession. Holding on to this movement as they faced each other sparked new conversations among community members about how far-reaching true honor could extend when grounded in support over restraint. Amidst emotional turmoil bubbling within herself, all once tied firmly to loss and despair, Beatrice found determination pulse beneath her skin anew. She stood ready not only to reclaim her narrative, but to help shape a future forged from respect instead of submission. In that dawning light thick with promise, Beatrice knew that unshackling outdated burdens rested not solely on individual desires, but collectively could transform their community into one where everyone had a voice worth hearing. Their time was ripe for evolution, not just for herself, but for all who longed for liberation from fear-laden shackles forged long ago in tradition's grasp. As the sunlight streamed over the town, Beatrice Monroe stood at the edge of the growing assembly, grappling with a tumult of emotions that crashed within her like waves against a rocky shore. The weight of grief for her late husband, William, pressed heavily on her heart, and the choices laid before her felt insurmountable. In one direction lay a life with Gus, the saloon owner who insisted that marriage was her only option to escape eviction and live somewhat comfortably. In another, there was Tokala, a man whose very presence ignited hope and challenged everything she had ever been taught about womanhood and dependency. Beatrice recalled her marriage to William. Their love had been profound yet simple, an understanding rooted deeply in shared dreams and hard work on their small farm. She remembered the laughter they shared beneath starlit skies, his encouraging words when times were tough, and the way he believed in her strength. Yet now those memories felt bittersweet as they reminded her of a time when she felt secure and valued, not just as someone's wife but as an equal partner. But William was gone, and with him fled that sense of security. The sorrow she felt was still fresh. It lingered like a cloud over every decision she faced. Would marrying Gus erase that loss? Or would it bury her deeper into despair and limitation? Gus's words echoed in her mind. A woman alone is a burden. His insistence that she must depend on a man for protection twisted into horrifying shapes in her thoughts. Was it truly better to surrender to marriage just to avoid being labeled a burden? As she glanced at Tokala addressing the townsfolk with passion and integrity, Beatrice felt an undeniable pull toward him. He represented honor, an understanding that women could stand tall without a man controlling their fates. His respect for her past kindness ignited something dormant within her, a yearning for recognition as an individual rather than merely someone else's possession or obligation. Yet even this glimmer of possibility was cloudy with uncertainty. What did fighting for independence mean when traditional laws loomed like shadows over every woman standing in society? She considered what it might be like to take Tokala's offer seriously, not only to honor his sister's memory but also to reclaim her own life from suffocating expectations. It was then that doubts crept into Beatrice's mind once again. Would they view her plea for autonomy as defiance? Would choosing Tokala's path bring more scorn upon herself than glory? The angst churned within her like a tempest as memories of judgmental whispers danced through the air around them. She caught fleeting glimpses across the crowd. Men were beginning to nod along with Tokala's assertions about honor and mutual respect rather than obligation. The very foundation of societal expectations that perpetuated views of women's worth tied solely to husbands. Would these changing tides support her desire for change? Amidst gathering clouds outside her heart stretched hope intertwined with pain, a realization emerged. She had spent too long allowing grief, societal norms, and the prospect of dependence confine her mind. Perhaps defining herself was not solely about grieving William's loss, but also finding strength in things they could never have achieved together. The thought excited yet terrified Beatrice. Standing at this crossroads between tradition and progress left an imprint on her soul as she contemplated all she had endured since losing him, the unyielding pressures now compounded by Gus's looming threat. This moment represented possibilities beyond anything society deemed acceptable. It beckoned courage anew. Caught in reflection between choices suspended in front of her like constellations shaped by decisions made decades before, she began to visualize a future propelled not by fear, but by agency grounded firmly in who she wanted to become. By listening to Tokala instead allowing Gus' snide comments shape decisions regarding union meant redefining love itself. She envisioned a community where honor didn't derive merely from ownership or commitment, but instead arose through acts rooted in kindness, compassion, and most importantly, freedom. The whispers around had shifted now. Conversations sparked amidst those present swirling knowledge with enthusiasm, instead of doubt around her resolving whether duty derived from obligations should hold precedence over authenticity. Normalizing mutual respect became instrumental toward flourishing lives together as equals. With each beat echoing against walls confined within societal constraints began to soften. Beatrice took deep breaths considering what tomorrow might look like if only more individuals recognized true strength came from agency, rather than chains crafted through tradition across generations past, but rather uplift humanity boundlessly, including those who desired liberation collectively rallied now under common truths waiting just beyond sight. And facing down gut-wrenching fears raised within shadows so sewn tightly around expectations prevented embracing autonomy. The undeniable power was rising up alongside burgeoning courage inside Beatrice, holding promise for liberation unheard alive, long overdue from shackles binding desires lost somewhere deep beneath burdens owed, from which they might reclaim their destinies unshackled forevermore. The council meeting unfolded under the brightening sky, an atmosphere charged with conflicting emotions and opinions. As Beatrice stood at the center of the crowd, each person's gaze felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. Some were there in support of her independence and the honor Tokala had spoken of, while others remained resolute in their belief that marrying Gus was her only path forward. "I believe in what Tokala says," Samuel Jenkins declared, stepping forward to address the crowd. "Beatrice deserves to choose her own path. She is strong and capable, and it's time we recognize that a woman does not need a man to survive." His voice rang out with conviction, prompting a few scattered nods among those who had begun to question their long-held beliefs. However, in stark contrast, Gus stood rigidly at the fringes, his expression darkening with each passing moment. "You all are blinded by his words. Beatrice is a burden on this town," he shouted defiantly, attempting to rally support. "Without me, she has no future. You are all foolish to think otherwise." His tone dripped with contempt, but it was clear that his bravado was starting to crack under the mounting pressure of dissent. Mixed reactions rippled through the crowd as whispers erupted among the townsfolk. Some were swayed by Gus's insistence that security lay within the confines of marriage. Others began to echo Samuel's belief in Beatrice's right to autonomy. "What about Mrs. Hargrove?" one voice piped up, recalling the elder woman's own struggles after losing her husband. "She managed just fine running her shop alone." More voices followed, emboldened by this rallying cry. "Yes. And we've seen other women thrive after losing their husbands, working hard and raising families without marrying again." Encouragement spread like wildfire as people began to share their own stories of perseverance. Tokala sensed the tide shifting and seized the moment to bolster the conversation anew. "This is what honor looks like," he interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Not tying someone down to tradition but empowering them to soar beyond constraints." Beatrice's bravery should inspire us all. Dedication is shown in respect for her choices. The tide had turned, but not without a fight. Gus's face flushed with anger as he realized he was losing ground. "You're all forgetting your duties. A woman is destined to be cared for by a man," he thundered, struggling to regain control over a narrative slipping from his grasp. Unfazed by Gus's outburst, those who supported Beatrice took a step forward. "We have spent too long shackled to these expectations," one woman cried out passionately. "It's time for us to support each other rather than bind ourselves in chains." The chatter crescendoed as divisions within the community became starkly apparent. The gathering was no longer just about Beatrice's plight. It had turned into a larger confrontation of gender norms that had persisted for generations. Conversations intensified as people engaged in debates over what it meant to build a life rooted in partnership rather than obligation. Amidst the clamor, Beatrice felt hope bloom within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced since William's passing. She realized she was not alone in this fight. She had allies rallying behind her, each one challenging the very foundations of outdated traditions. Yet doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. Would this support last when the dust settled? Would individuals still stand beside her when the winds of public opinion shifted once more? But as she looked at faces filled with determination and solidarity, she found courage beginning to take root within herself. "I know losing my husband changed everything," she began tentatively, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "But I refuse to let fear dictate my future or allow others to define my worth based on whether I am married." A hush fell over the crowd as they turned their attention toward her. It was not just a personal declaration, it was a challenge to every expectation they had ever held about women's roles in their community. Gus's expression twisted with disbelief at her boldness, but even he could not deny the power of her words echoed through the assembly. "I want to stand not just for myself, but for all women who have been told they must conform," Beatrice continued passionately. "Together we can redefine what honor means, not through marriage or ownership, but through mutual respect and empowerment." The murmurings around her transformed from skepticism into what felt like a collective awakening. People started nodding along as they processed this new understanding. In that pivotal moment, divisions became a catalyst for change rather than division itself. It marked the beginning of a shift toward reimagining their community's values. One where independence was embraced rather than labeled an affront to safety and tradition. As their voices intertwined like threads of a tapestry uniting them with purpose, Beatrice felt strength surge within her, a promise that she would not only reclaim her story but contribute to the rewriting of their shared future. A future where honor stemmed from respect and compassion instead of binding obligations. As tensions rose in the council meeting, Tokala stood resolute, the bright morning sun illuminating the red sash cinched around his waist, a powerful symbol of mourning and respect. He felt a surge of responsibility wash over him. This was more than just a defense of Beatrice Monroe. It was a pivotal moment that could redefine the values of an entire community. "Good people of this town," Tokala began, his voice steady but passionate, addressing the assembly with an intensity that commanded attention. "I come before you today to speak not just for Beatrice, but for every woman who has been silenced by traditions that bind them to old ways. Today, we have an opportunity to recognize the honor in her autonomy." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as people leaned in closer, curious about Tokala's perspective. Those who had dared to question the norm were listening intently now. "Beatrice saved my sister's life in a time of desperation when few would have reached out to help," he continued, gesturing respectfully toward Beatrice. "She displayed bravery and compassion that deserves recognition, not punishment for being alone in a man's world." Beatrice felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For so long, she had wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and helplessness. Yet here was this warrior, a figure who understood and acknowledged her worth beyond societal expectations. It was invigorating. But in the corner of her eye, she caught Gus shifting uneasily, clearly displeased by the support building around Tokala's message. "This is absurd," Gus spat, trying to regain control over the narrative. "Women were made for homes. Beatrice can't be on her own. We all know the dangers waiting outside these walls." His tone dripped with condescension, but cracks had begun to form in his arguments under scrutiny. "Danger? Or opportunity?" one man called out from the back, drawing supportive murmurs from others nearby. His question seemed to hang in the air like a dare to rethink their reliance on outdated norms. Tokala seized on this opening, pursuing the idea. "Do we define ourselves by fear?" he asked, sweeping his gaze across the crowd filled with doubt and reinforcement alike. Are we so shackled by tradition that we cannot see what true courage looks like? Some among them began nodding slowly as they pondered his words. Tokala pressed forward, eagerness lighting up his eyes. Honor does not come from forcing someone into submission. It comes from uplifting one another. Encouraged by his call for recognition and respect for women's autonomy, Samuel Jenkins stepped forward again, voice strong. We've lived too long dictated by fear, the idea that without a man we are somehow lacking. Let's embrace our strength together instead. His sentiment resonated deeply within the crowd, igniting hearts that sought change. Gus's expression darkened, frustration bubbling over as it became increasingly clear he was losing ground. What will happen if we allow such independence to flourish? He challenged desperately, seeking to sow fear among those who still held tightly to antiquated beliefs. But instead of crumbling before his threat, those supporting Beatrice gathered closer, and an unexpected unity emerged among them like a gathering storm. Conversations sparked amongst themselves as stories flowed, sharing experiences of the women who had thrived independently or those who had been crushed under burdens they should never have borne alone. Will we allow our daughters and sisters to live under constraints we know are unjust? One woman shouted passionately, her voice ringing out clear among the cacophony. The crowd buzzed with fresh energy. Soon shouts of support broke out, threading through each shared struggle, flooding their minds with hope as they envisioned a different future. One where mutual respect could empower individuals and uplift families rather than restrict them within societal constructs designed decades earlier. In that crucial moment, with acts of bravery surrounding her and paving new paths that previously felt impossible for women meant building a collective bridge toward empowerment. Forging connections beyond conventional expectations locally ingrained within their culture. With every voice added to the chorus challenging accepted norms, becoming allies bound together by shared dreams, Beatrice felt renewed purpose blooming strongly inside her heart. She witnessed glimpses of liberation existing not just within herself, but resonating through draining changes, rousing hope for wider acceptance. Tokala turned to Beatrice briefly and nodded encouragingly. They were in this together, not as individuals on opposing sides, but rather as partners advocating for principles worthy of defending dignity, respect, and sunny possibilities valued above chains forged long ago. As tension bobbed between old customs dangling precariously against emerging possibilities, standing among her allies, Beatrice knew there was no turning back now. They had sparked something dangerous yet undoubtedly essential. An awakening among women ready to claim their narratives and create futures illuminated brightly beyond constricting darkness lurking about lives forced toward rigid definitions at every corner. This pivotal council meeting was merely a beginning, not just a fight for one woman's honor, but an invitation for redefining what collaborative strength looked like. A movement fueled by desire, unmarred by fear, pressing against freedom like dawn, dispersing dark clouds, finally granting light into horizons yet unexplored. As the council meeting progressed, the atmosphere became increasingly charged, with chatter intertwining both support for Beatrice's autonomy and calls to uphold tradition. Beatrice stood at the center, her heart racing as she realized this moment was not only pivotal for her, but also for the future of the town itself. She felt the weight of generations of expectations pressing down on her, and now, the decision before her was no longer just about herself. It was about challenging social norms that had dictated women's lives for far too long. Beatrice, Samuel called out, drawing everyone's attention back to her. This is your moment. Speak your truth. His encouragement infused her with urgency and purpose as eyes turned expectantly toward her. Taking a deep breath, Beatrice stepped forward into the light that streamed through the windows of the town hall. It illuminated not just her figure, but also the resolve blooming within her heart. I have lived under the shadow of expectation for too long, she began, feeling each word strengthen her stance. For years, I believed my worth was tied to my husband and his role as provider. But since losing him, I have come to understand that my value cannot be defined by marriage or the presence of a man. A supportive murmur rippled through the crowd, sparking a flicker of hope within Beatrice, though fear still lingered like shadows in her mind. She glanced at Tokala, who nodded encouragingly. His unwavering support fueled her determination. I do not wish to be bound by obligations that suffocate my spirit, she continued, gaining momentum. I am capable of building my own life and contributing to this community in ways that do not require me to marry simply for security. My worth is inherent, It does not rest on whether I am married or alone. Gus bristled at her declaration, his frustration boiling over as he struggled to maintain his authority among those questioning his narrative. You're being reckless, he argued, voice sharp with indignation. Women are meant to be cared for. Without a man like me to protect you, you will only face harm. But this time, his words fell flat against the tide of support surging around Beatrice. One woman from the crowd shouted back indignantly, "What harm lies in independence? We know women who have thrived without husbands. We've seen them hold their heads high and build their own lives." Tokala seized upon this growing momentum. "You see," he said, gesturing to Beatrice as if introducing a crucial truth, "this is about more than just one woman's future. This is a chance for all women in our community to redefine their roles, to embrace their strength instead of conforming to old expectations." The crowd shifted restlessly, many beginning to voice their support more energetically now. Conversations erupted around various women sharing their experiences as individuals who had either found fulfillment outside marriage or had faced struggles due to societal constraints. Will we let our daughters grow up thinking they need protection instead of guiding them toward empowerment? Another voice rang out passionately among newfound allies forming around Beatrice. As voices rose in solidarity and resolution filled the assembly hall with energy, Beatrice felt a profound bond solidify between them all, one that defied Gus's insistent claims rooted in fear and obligation. Her heart raced even faster now. She understood that whatever choice she made would resonate beyond herself. It could plant seeds for change within their community. The weight of that understanding drove her forward. We deserve honor based on our actions and choices, not our marital status, Beatrice declared firmly. Amidst an uproar of agreement and nodding heads surrounding her, it was quickly clear that this moment was about more than just one woman declaring independence. It was a collective commitment being forged. A commitment toward recognizing individual capacity and power across boundaries once created by tradition. As Gus began stammering desperate retorts, struggling against the tide pooling around Beatrice's message of urging support and mutual respect, she took a step closer toward what could be a new dawn for both herself and those readying themselves for dismantling chains confining them through rigid definitions imposed by history. The roar of unity around her resounded like an anthem of hope. Every voice offered validation and longing for futures built upon equality rather than outdated expectations. As Beatrice surveyed the assembly, friends standing shoulder to shoulder alongside her, she understood that this moment would shape her destiny. Then came the soul-stirring realization. This was not merely a choice about marriage or survival. It showcased profound possibilities unshackled from traditional constraints awaiting them all. Their determination could light pathways ahead where autonomy spoke louder than chains ever could. The potential rose like dawn, dispelling night's shadows, yielding bright horizons yearning for exploration. With courage swelling inside her as brightly as morning light now breaking through darkness grip, for Beatrice Monroe stood on sacred ground ready to embrace what tomorrow might hold, transforming fear once imposed upon them into vibrant avenues for growth leading toward an undeniable freedom sought by many, finally becoming reality before their very eyes. The atmosphere in the council meeting shifted dramatically as Beatrice Monroe boldly claimed her independence, the energy between the townspeople transforming into something electric. With every word she spoke, layers of traditional expectations began to unravel, revealing a community eager for change but still apprehensive about breaking free from long-held beliefs. Today, I stand before you not just as a widow but as a woman determined to shape my own life, Beatrice declared, her voice firm and unwavering. The sunlight streaming through the windows cast a warm glow on her face, illuminating her resolve. I am tired of being viewed as a burden. I refuse to let someone else dictate my worth based on whether I am married or alone. The crowd shifted. Murmurs of agreement rippled through those gathered in support of Beatrice's newfound resolve. It was clear that Tokala's presence had ignited a spark, empowering women to embrace their strength and potential beyond the constraints of men's expectations. Beatrice's words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to dismiss them. Gus was visibly struggling to maintain his composure as he tried to counter her declaration. "You're being foolish," he shouted, his voice laced with frustration. "You think you can thrive out there on your own? Every woman needs a man for protection." His desperate attempts to regain control were becoming increasingly ineffective against the tide of support swelling around Beatrice. But rather than cowering under Gus's harsh rhetoric, more townsfolk stepped forward with stories that echoed Beatrice's sentiments. They shared tales of resilience and independence, women who had thrived without husbands, challenging Gus's claims with undeniable evidence that survival and even success was possible without male guidance. "Listen," one elder woman called from the back, her voice strong despite age. "I raised my children after losing my husband. I didn't falter. I built a life for us." Her words resonated deeply within the gathering and sparked further conversations about mutual respect and shared values rather than outdated roles. Tokala sees this moment of unity as he stood beside Beatrice like an unwavering pillar of strength. "What we are witnessing here is not just a defense of one woman but an awakening," he said passionately. "If we allow ourselves to embrace change and uplift one another, our community will be stronger for it." As voices rose in agreement and solidarity filled the room, Beatrice felt a profound sense of empowerment wash over her. The fear that had once gripped her heart began to dissipate like morning fog under the sun's rays. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about thriving together as equals, each person recognized for their inherent worth. Beatrice took another step forward, fueled by the collective energy surrounding her. "It is time we redefine what honor means in our community," she asserted confidently. "Honor is not found in marriage or submission. It lies within our choices and our ability to stand tall despite obstacles." With each declaration she made, she noticed more nods among her neighbors. Men and women alike were beginning to understand that supporting one another instead of forcing conformity would lead not only to individual fulfillment, but also to the health of their entire community. In that pivotal moment, as if responding naturally to an unseen force guiding them toward change, people began moving together like threads weaving into a rich tapestry, each interwoven story contributing to a future based on equality rather than tradition. While Gus continued expressing disbelief and anger at this transformation occurring around him, he began losing footing within his rigid fortress of control. Realizing his grasp on power was slipping away rapidly, frustration bubbled over into desperation. "Will we all allow chaos to reign?" Gus cried out one final time amidst rising chatter. But his protest fell flat against the sound waves crashing against him. Voices united and purpose drowned out his desperate pleas. This was no longer merely Beatrice's moment. It marked the beginning of an evolution for everyone present. A chance to cultivate new values rooted firmly in respect and shared responsibility instead of outdated constructs binding them tightly through conformity. As joy bubbled within her heart, a promise ignited by collective courage, the vision of bright horizons opened wide along paths once hidden away surfaced anew before their very eyes. Turning toward Tokala again briefly with gratitude shining through her eyes, they stood united now together forging ahead toward uncharted territories filled with potential. A chance for liberation they all dared dream could become reality at last, empowered by voices readying themselves boldly reclaim narratives long forgotten but never lost. In the weeks following Beatrice Monroe's powerful declaration of independence, the town began to change in ways many had never imagined possible. What had once been a community mired in outdated traditions started to awaken to new possibilities, fueled by the courage displayed during the council meeting. With Beatrice at the forefront, empowered by her allies and supported by the growing awareness of her neighbors, a shift in dynamics began to take root. Beatrice often found herself reflecting on how this transformation affected not only her life but also the lives of other women within the community. It was as though a ripple had coursed through the town. Conversations once cloaked in silence and subservience now echoed through the streets, filled with voices of women sharing their stories of resilience and empowerment. Women who felt trapped in roles defined by their relationships were starting to realize their autonomy and ability to shape their futures. At the Saturday market, Beatrice wandered through booths filled with fruits and handmade goods, greeted by smiles and nods from familiar faces. "Have you heard what Martha did?" one woman exclaimed as she approached Beatrice. "She's opening her own bakery. Can you believe it? She's been practicing for years." Beatrice felt a surge of pride swell within her. Each story of independence celebrated during those market days resonated deeply. They served as reminders that every woman could illuminate their worth beyond societal confines. The boundaries separating them from each other had begun to dissolve, replaced by connections forged in mutual respect and shared purpose. Meanwhile, Tokala often visited from his camp outside town, participating in discussions with the townsfolk and encouraging everyone to embrace this newfound perspective on honor and community. His presence served as a reminder that strength could come from unity rather than division. He frequently spoke to groups about the importance of valuing every individual's journey. Freedom is not just about being unchained. It's about creating an environment where all voices are revered. Word began to spread far beyond the borders of their small town. Travelers passing through would stop and hear tales of bravery and determination from local women who dared to challenge conventions. The narrative surrounding Beatrice shifted from that of a widow burdened by debts to a beacon of hope, someone who inspired others to rise above fear. However, not everyone embraced these changes with open arms. Gus, feeling his grip on power slipping away, attempted to manipulate public opinion against Beatrice's movement, insisting that chaos would reign if traditional marriages were dismissed entirely. "You will see. A community without strong male figures will crumble," he warned at town gatherings, trying desperately to rally those loyal to his beliefs. But with each rebuttal thrown at him from empowered women, Gus's claims became increasingly discredited. One evening, during a heated discussion at town hall, a group of men voiced their support for Beatrice. "We've seen families thrive without relying solely on men," one man asserted firmly. "It's time we recognize that strength lies within everyone." The tide was turning. Men began realizing that challenging gender norms did not threaten their identities, but rather enrich their community's fabric as a whole. Emboldened by progress and the healing power of collaboration, Beatrice decided it was time for a more formal gathering, a celebration to honor this journey toward empowerment for all women in their community. She envisioned an event where stories could be shared openly, allowing every woman's voice to be heard while embracing collective strength. When she presented this idea at the community meeting, excitement rippled through the crowd. "Let's have a festival, a day dedicated to celebrating our resilience and achievements," she proposed enthusiastically. With each external cheer rising within the assembly hall, friends calling out support, it became clear that Beatrice wanted this gathering not merely for herself, but for everyone who had contributed courageously to dismantling oppressive chains affixed by tradition throughout generations gone by. As preparations for the festival began, it marked more than just an event. It represented a commemorative moment defining their values moving forward. A chance for unity among families rather than division over antiquated beliefs surrounding gender roles. The day arrived brightly adorned under blue skies, inviting all within reach. Even skeptics found themselves entangled in joyful camaraderie, gathered on common ground amid melodious music drifting through air thickened with anticipation, buzzing loudly across vibrant booths showcasing crafts created proudly by local artisans. As she looked around at familiar faces, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder united, their collective happiness swelled toward infinite possibility, radiating warmth across every heart present there. Deep within confirmed something profound. Change had finally taken root within this community through love born courageously against hardship, transforming doubt into belief, a reality crafted among those daring enough to embrace freedom together, emerging into newfound legacies forever changed. Through reflections on gathered paths woven intricately over time, honor had shifted entirely, no longer tied down simply by marriage or convention, weaving future bonds ignited brighter horizons unmarred, now flourishing alongside dreams rebirthed unfettered.